Greetings, Cleveland, and welcome to Creative Focus, the show that illuminates some of Cleveland's most talented and creative artists across the genres of dance, film, music, theater, TV, and visual arts. I'm your host, Cornell Calhoun III, and I'm thrilled, honored to have as my guest today on Creative Focus, award-winning news anchor and journalist, Mr. Russ Mitchell. Russ, welcome to Creative Focus, man.
Cal, it's great to be here. Welcome to Channel 3.
Let's chop it up.
I love it. Let's do it.
I know you were born in St. Louis.
That's right.
Raised in Rock Hill.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and there are a lot of terms that St. Louis can be associated with. Brewery, Cardinals, diverse, gateway,
right.
Gritty, segregation. How did the St. Louis environment shape the Russell Mitchell that we see today?
My mother would appreciate you calling me Russell Mitchell. So first of all, Cal, it's great to be here. Thank you very much. And I appreciate the question. St. Louis is a lot like Cleveland, I think, which is one of the reasons I think Cleveland became home so quickly to me. Socially, politically, almost climate-wise, the lake makes things a little colder for a little longer here. But I think growing up, in the 1960s and 70s, like I did in St. Louis, in a city that, much like Cleveland, was and is still struggling with its identity and still struggling with its racial identity as well, was certainly something that has helped me along the way. I grew up, as you said, in the suburb of Rock Hill, Missouri, which is not as country as it sounds. It really, it's not exactly a metropolis, but it's not as country as it sounds. But a very diverse community I grew up in, and I think that's something that taught me well, that helped me a lot. And also going to the high school that I went to, it was a public high school, but it was very competitive, and I think that helped as well. And my parents were amazing, and my grandparents, and I was very fortunate to have a great family. Many of my family members were in St. Louis at the time. So when I look at the things I'm grateful for and how St. Louis helped shape me, I have to go back to my parents and the way they brought me up, or at least tried to bring me up.
One thing that I found fascinating is that you worked at a TV station when you were in high school.
Yes.
How did that come about?
Well, it's interesting. I was at a journalism workshop at the University of Missouri, a school of journalism, between my junior and senior years of high school. And I said to myself when I came out of this workshop, I was so pumped I was going to get a job at a TV station. Now, Cal, keep in mind, I'm 17 years old. I don't know anything. I'm thinking, well, what if they need a 17-year-old reporter? What if they need a 17-year-old producer, photographer? I went down the list. My cousin, actually, who knew someone at the station, said, hey, why don't you call them up? They've got a job opening. And I asked every one of those positions, is it this, is it that? She said, no, you'd be answering the phone. So my senior year of high school, my job was the night switchboard operator at KTVI in St. Louis.
KTVI TV.
And for those people who of a certain age who may not know what a switchboard was, it's the guy who sat and answered the phone. You'd answer the phone, good evening, KTVI Channel 2, and you transfer those calls to the appropriate place. I did that my senior year of high school at night. I got to tell you something. I answered the phone at night. I would go back to the newsroom and just kind of hang out. The people I met in that year and the experiences I had just being around those people were invaluable. And when I look back at my life, not much my career, because I wasn't really in TV then, but my career, my life, I think that was probably one of the most important years for me in many ways.
That was an ABC affiliate at the time.
It was.
Right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And is it Fox?
It's Fox. It was sold years ago after I left. And I may be getting ahead of myself, but I actually wound up going back to that station years later as a reporter, ironically, after graduating from college and having a couple jobs in between, so it was full circle for me. But that was an amazing experience.
You worked in various cities, St. Louis, Kansas City, Dallas, back to St. Louis. How do you think working in those various markets impacted your career?
Kansas City was my first job, and I was pretty fresh. I was just out of journalism school. In fact, my title was reporter trainee, which meant I did all the jobs the regular reporters, full-scale reporters did, except get paid like them. It was a very humbling experience in that way. My second job was in Dallas. I was very lucky. I got a job in a very big market at age 23. The first year I was there was rough because, again, I was dealing with people who had been doing this for a long time, and I learned a lot, in that year. About a lot of things. My second year there, I was able to catch up, and I think I did a good job. I think that second year. First year, I got to tell you, personally and professionally, was rough. Then I went back, got a job offer to go back to St. Louis, and people thought I was crazy. Why would you leave Dallas to go to St. Louis, a smaller market? But for me, at that period of time, it was again a very strategically important move for me because I knew going back to St. Louis, I could not only take the things that I learned in Dallas, but also given more opportunities in St. Louis to do things. And it proved to be a good move in that way. Cal, for years, people had asked me, not knowing the story, why would you do that? Well, I figured it'd be my tombstone one day. Here's Russ, he went from Dallas to St. Louis. But I was able to take, those things I learned in Dallas with this incredibly, talented staff there, and go back to St. Louis, in fact, the station where I answered the phone, and take some of those things and also be given other opportunities as well. So it was a great growth experience for me. And I tell people all the time, don't be afraid to take a step back to move forward, because you sometimes have to do that. And that, to me, was a pivotal moment, I think, in my career.
In 1985, you produced a widely acclaimed series about the drug gangsters in East St. Louis. Talk a little bit about that and that experience.
Yeah, I mean, that was certainly an eye-opening experience for me. The photographer that I worked with for a long time, named Larry Washington, who's still in the business, by the way, would go to East St. Louis every day and basically hang out with gang members. At the time, East St. Louis had a really bad gang problem. We were able to gain the trust of the gang members. We got into situations with them, meetings and things like that. Wow. There are, various things that they had that no one else had been able to infiltrate at that time. That's something I'm very proud of, because that series wound up being part of the training exercise for the Illinois State Police when it came to dealing with gangs. So it was an eye-opening experience, and one of the great things is, when you reach a certain age, you do things when you're young, and I think at the time I was 24 or 25. Do things I probably wouldn't do today. I probably wouldn't have hung out with the gang members as much as I did today as I did back then. Times are different, of course, but having the benefit of youth and the benefit of working with some really good people, we were able to do an incredibly successful special.
In 1992, you went local to global. CBS early show, CBS Evening News, and I had to smile when I read that you were the primary replacement for Dan Rather and Katie Couric. What were the challenges in going local to global for you?
Well, going from St. Louis to New York, I actually went there as the anchor of a show called Up to the Minute, which was the overnight news show. It was on from 2 a.m. To 6 a.m. It was the show before it, the show that ran before it was a show called Night Watch, which a lot of people were aware of. Charlie Rose anchored that. Yeah. That show went away, and they started this new overnight newscast called Up to the Minute. That was really in response to the CNN in the first Gulf War, when CNN was on 24 hours a day. So all the networks developed these overnight shows to give themselves a presence overnight. Once again, I mean, to me, it was one of those situations where, I've got to take this job. But many of my friends thought, wait a minute, why are you going from this cush job in St. Louis to work the overnights in New York City? And some of them considered that a step back in a lot of ways. I did not, because I knew the potential there. Potential, because you never know. would have been great for me to go on and do other things. So that first year, I was on the overnight show. And if you called the CBS switchboard in those days at 3 in the afternoon, they'd say, Russ, who? Because I wasn't there. But I was very fortunate.
That was Up to the Minute?
It was called Up to the Minute.
Okay.
Yeah, and I did it for a year, and I was very fortunate. And my boss at the time then put me on a news magazine called Eye to Eye with Connie Chung, which was a really, professionally was a really big move, for me. So I was on that broadcast for 2 years. It was a news magazine, so travel all over the world doing stories. Then I was transferred to the Washington Bureau, and I was in Washington for 4 years. And this was during the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky days. There were a lot of things going on there. Then went back to New York, and then some of those things that you talked about started happening. I had filled in on the morning show a lot during my time there after Up to the Minute, and eventually that became to a Sunday night evening news anchor job, and eventually that came to be, luckily one of the fill-ins for Dan Rather and Lady Katie Couric on the evening news. So it was for me. There were days every time I sat in that set and heard the music, starting the broadcast, I would get goosebumps, and I never did not. I always had those because I knew that was something I always wanted to do. So again, I feel very fortunate that I got to do that.
What was it like being a black news anchor and journalist at that time? Were you well received? Did you have any issues?
Yeah, I think so. There's always the question of opportunity.
Right.
And there are times when you wonder if you're not getting an opportunity for this, that, or the other. I can say at CBS, I don't think that I never saw that.
Okay,
that happening. I think that again, there are challenges every day of our lives.
Right.
But I never felt as though I had been discriminated against, in that way. Broadcasting on a national scale is different because you're broadcasting, of course, into the entire country.
Right.
So I do remember at the time getting some hate mail from certain states and people in certain states, something you don't typically get in local TV, although you do get some interesting feedback sometimes. But because your canvas is much bigger, you're more likely to make somebody angry, to just rub somebody the wrong way. At the same time, it's one of those things where if there's a big story somewhere, if I'm based in New York or DC or wherever, there's a big story in LA, like OJ, for instance, when I was there, it's a chance you're going to go do that.
Exactly.
So the canvas of that job to me was just, remarkable. And I was on the road a lot, which was great. We'll probably get this later, but it gets to a point where you don't want to be on the road as much anymore. But I could, those days of being on those broadcasts and working with some of the best people in the industry, I still look back on it and say, how lucky am I? And I keep using that word lucky, but because I really do feel that
That's
way.
That's big. In 1997, you won an Emmy for the TWA Flight 800. What was it like covering such a tragic event? 230 people lost their lives.
That Emmy was for our morning show coverage the day of the crash. It happened overnight, and I happened to be filling in on our morning show at that time. I forget what it was called at the time. CBS has had several incarnations of their morning show. I think it was called CBS This Morning. Okay. It later became The Early Show. I think it's now back to CBS Mornings, but at the time it was called, I believe, CBS This Morning. I anchored from East Moriches, New York, where on Long Island, where the plane had gone down. In situations like that, you really don't have a lot of time to think about it. You get very focused. You're trying to absorb as much information as you can and put it out there as concisely as you can. In that situation, you're at the network. You've got an incredible team that's working with you and helping you get this stuff and helping you put it in plain English and bringing you guests and things like that. But when those things happen like that, you really don't have a lot of time to think about it. You just kind of go on and you do your job. And it's afterward, from my experience, where you sit back and go, wow, that was really incredible, and that this plane went down, 200 yards from where I'm sitting right now. As you said, 230 people died. And to this day, I don't think they know what happened to it. But so it's challenging in the sense that you want to do a good job and you want to give people the best explanation of things. But in those breaking news situations, you're basically running in and you're going on your gut, you're going on what your folks are able to do. The information that you and the people you're working with have been able to come up with, and your experience also. And one of the things I tell younger people who are starting in this business, watch folks on TV now who you admire. Don't, emulate them, don't copy them, but look at what they do and see how they get into situations, how they get out of situations, how they handle things. For me, that person was Bryant Gumbel. Growing up, who to this day I believe the best morning show anchor in history. So taking all these things and all these different elements of things in that bucket, those are the kind of things that are going through your mind in that particular moment. But in the big picture, you're just kind of doing what you got to do.
What brought you to Cleveland, Ohio, CLE?
As I kind of alluded to earlier, I'd been on the road for like 20 years, traveling a lot, with CBS. It was fun, and at some point, I knew I always wanted to go back to local TV because I enjoy the power of local TV. I think that local TV provides an incredible service, and you can be a part as an anchor, as someone in a local station. You can be a part of a community. At the network level, at least where I was, at the level where I was, you really weren't. I really was not part of the community. Even though I lived in New York and lived in D.C. for all these times, I could not tell you that I was part of the New York community in that way. There were things I did for help with local organizations there, but not like you can do in local TV, where you truly can become, if you're lucky, a part of the community and a part of its fabric. So I was looking for that after saying to myself, okay, I think I want to get off the road, maybe a time to go back to local TV. So looked around, and Cleveland was actually my last stop because my agent at the time said, I was going to stay at CBS. My agent at the time said, hey, I want you to go look at the station in Cleveland. There's a number of things going on there that they like you. And I came here and fell in love with it. Not only the station, as you can see, Cal, this is an incredible facility. The people here could not have been nicer. And I told them what I was interested in, which was not someone to sit there and just read the news 5 nights a week, but someone who's involved in the process of putting that news product on the air and being a part of those discussions, and also being a part of the community. And that's what they were looking for. Other places I looked were just looking for that guy who would come out and, hey, here's some scripts, read them 5 days a week. Well, can I be a part of the meetings to discuss this? No, we don't need that, And I wasn't, and after spending 20 years at CBS and working with some of the best in the business and seeing how they operated, Dan Rather, Ed Bradley, Bryant Gumbel, I mentioned, the list goes on and on. Seeing how they operated, they were not those people. They were people who were involved in what went on the air that day. So anyway, it all kind of worked out, and I've been here for 14 years now.
14 years. Mm-hmm. In the decades that you've covered the news, features, and how has the industry changed, and what's the same?
Oh wow, it's how much time you got, Cal? It's changed a lot. When I started, there was no CNN, so you didn't have a 24-hour news presence. There was no internet. My 17-year-old daughter will ask me if I had Facebook when I was in high school. I go, no, I did not have that. We had Twitter, right? No, I didn't have that. We didn't have any of those things. So that has dramatically changed the way the industry works, because you don't have to wait until 5, 6, whatever to find out what's going on. It's always there on your phone or at your computer if you just click on what you want. So it's changed that way a lot, the distribution of things. We've seen an incredible change in the past few years with streaming, because I think if you were to ask anybody under the age of, 40, when was the last time you sat down and watched something on TV as appointment viewing? Something's on at 7 o'clock, I gotta be in front of that TV at 7. I think many of them would tell you, I haven't done that in a long time, because you don't have to do that anymore. Right. You can get it, whenever you want. It's all clickable. So it's changed a lot, and that's one of the ways that it's changed. It's a lot faster. It's also increased the pressure on us in this linear world, as they call it, of broadcast journalism, to be extra careful, because it's very easy to see something on a social media post that you think is the truth and go on TV with it. The internet, there are no gatekeepers. The internet's the Wild West. You and I can get on the internet right now and say anything we want, and no one's going to stop us. No one is going to tell us that's wrong. There may be people writing in telling us that, but there are no gatekeepers. And I can tell you, in the early days of social media and the internet, a lot of broadcast outlets, including the networks, got in trouble because they, and again, in that quest for trying to be first, they would see something on the internet and without checking it out, would go on air with it or whatever. So that's different as well. Those are just two examples of how things have changed in the past, 40 years since I've been doing this. How have things stayed the same? We're still telling stories. It's still about tell me a story. It's still about going out and talking to people and finding out what's happening. I look at a show like 60 Minutes, and Don Hewitt, who was the executive producer and creator of 60 Minutes, always said his edict was simple: tell me a story. That hasn't changed. So we're still doing that. We're still telling stories, and I think that the television news, done correctly and given the time, still does that better than anybody else, because we can bring people into a situation and let them experience things and let them see what's happening at that moment. And I think that's still incredibly important.
What do you want your legacy to be?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. I hope that wherever I work, that people, look at me as a hard worker and someone who perhaps set a good example and was nice to folks. And at this point in my career, I am trying to help out people who are coming up. So I hope those people remember me as that person who tried to help me along the way, as people tried to help me also.
Well spoken, sir. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thanch you very much. I appreciate it.
So much of an honor.
Well, honor for me. I appreciate it. And again, welcome to Channel 3.
So that's it, Cleveland. We're out. But remember, a true artist is not only inspired, but inspires others. I'm Cornell Calhoun III for TV 20 and Creative Focus. Until the next time becomes our time, be well, be safe.